Okay, so we've covered the basic information about the three groups of colonies: New England, the middle, and the southern colonies, the original 13 colonies. There's one last bit of information that you might need to know, that you might get asked about on a test, and that has to do with a greater push towards democratic rights in the colonies. Right? And it's three things that you might need to know about. And the first one is, put it here, the Virginia House of Burgesses. And that's 1619. Okay, Virginia House of Burgesses. The second thing is the Mayflower Compact. (1620). And the third thing is the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. CT, it's Connecticut. Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, and that is 1639. So there's two documents and a body, and a lawmaking body. All right, so you might get asked about this on a test. There might be a question about this. So what was the Virginia House of Burgesses? It was the first colonial legislative body. Right? It was a lawmaking body. So think about the state house, the legislature in Texas. You can think about Congress up in Washington, D.C., right? Legislative bodies. Well, same kind of thing. It was elected by colonists. Now, this was pretty new, right? So the Legislative Assembly in Virginia, the whole thing, was modeled after Parliament. So over in England, Parliament has two houses. There's an upper house and a lower house. And this was the lower house. So a parallel could be the House of Representatives in Congress. So the upper house is the U.S. Senate. Lower house is the House of Representatives. So this is kind of like the House of Representatives, kind of like the House of Representatives in the state of Texas. It's like the House of Representatives up in Washington, D.C. in Congress. Right? It's the lower house. Right? The upper house was called the Council of State. You're probably not going to be asked about that, but it had a name. It was selected by the Crown, Governor's Advisory Council, but essentially the Crown. This was democratically elected. Now, not everybody could vote, of course. Indians can vote, black people can vote, white people, well, poor white people can vote. Certainly women can vote. So you had to be a white person and you had to have property. There might have been another restriction that I can't think of off the top of my head. But it was a little push. It was at least somewhat of an advancement towards democratic rights. Okay? So that was the Virginia House of Burgesses. The Mayflower Compact and the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, those are documents. So imagine 1620, and we're pilgrims, and we're on the Mayflower. We're on the ship, and we get to land. And before we get off the ship, we make a pledge that we're going to follow some rules. The Mayflower Compact doesn't state what the rules are, only that they are, quote, just and equal, unquote. And the way they voted on this was one man. It's a man, of course, right? Again, because it took a long time for women to gain the right to vote in this country. One man, one vote. So that was another push towards greater democratic rights. The Mayflower Compact, okay, it was an agreement that people signed, they voted on, and they signed. The Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, that's a little bit, it's not as well known as the Mayflower Compact, okay, but it was important at the time. It established the system of government in Connecticut, in the colony of Connecticut. It was considered by some people to be the first written constitution. And it broadened voting rights to all free men, not just men who owned land or were members of a church. So a little bit broader here than voting in the Virginia House of Burgesses. Right? And it sets some limits on the power of government. We don't need to go into what those limits are. You don't need to know that. You just need to know that it broadened voting rights to all men, not just men who own property. Okay? So those are the three other things about the 13 colonies that you might need to know on a test.